Committed to challenging society to recognize and celebrate the contributions of all individuals, specifically Black people and queer communities, Garza's activism is rooted in organizational strategies and visions to connect individuals and emerging social movements. Her work has earned her various honors, including 2 Harvey Milk Democratic Club Community Activist Awards for her work fighting gentrification and environmental racism in San Francisco's largest remaining Black community.
Delivering powerful perspective on the adversities inflicted by social injustice and discrimination, Garza educates and inspires audiences to organize and stand together to transform society into a world where the lives and contributions of all individuals are recognized equally. Please join us in welcoming Alicia Garza.
Okay, I'm going to time myself because I can go. How y'all doing? You seem sleepy. How y'all doing? I'm convinced. Okay, so shall we get in? Let's go. Okay. Couple of quick housekeeping things. I'm getting over a cold. So if I start hacking uncontrollably, just give me a minute. What I want to talk about tonight is, I want to talk a little bit about the origins of Black Lives Matter. We've written about it, we've talked about it a lot, but one thing that I do find is that, you know, it's important for us to tell our own stories, our own way. And so I'm excited to share with you the story of how this began. And I also want to talk a little bit about why Black Lives Matter. Why has this gotten traction in this moment? And what are the conditions, right? The social conditions, the political conditions, the economic conditions, the cultural conditions that make something like Black Lives Matter possible now. And then I was asked to talk a little bit about why we say Black Lives Matter and why we don't do that All Lives Matter thing. Yeah? And then I want to talk a little bit about where we're headed. And I'm hoping to be able to do that in an hour, because I can talk. So, see if I can time myself. The other thing that I want to just name, there's 2 things. So one is we lost an incredible leader yesterday, Grace Lee Boggs. And so I just want to pay homage. Grace Lee Boggs was a pioneer, is a pioneer in so many ways, but one of the things that really inspires me about Grace Lee Boggs was her work around visioning and living in the world that we want to see. You know, Grace Lee Boggs really embodied this principle. It's not theory, right? It's about making the world by how we live in the right now. It's about shifting the way that we relate to each other, the way that we relate to ourselves, shifting the way that we tell stories about who we are, what we're about, what connects us fundamentally. So I want to just give some time and honor her. And I also want to just name that usually when I start these conversations, I start by calling the names of people who we've lost. People that we've lost to violence, people that we have lost before their time. But I stopped doing that. And I might start it again. But I stopped doing it, one, because the list of names is so long. And 2, because to be quite honest with you, it weighs on your heart. Right? When we call the names of people like Trayvon Martin, who was a child when he was murdered. We call the names of people like Jordan Davis, who was murdered because his music was too loud. When we call the names of people like Lanisha McBride, who was murdered for asking for help. When we call the names of people like Penny Proud and Alon Nettles and so many other Black trans women who are murdered just for trying to live, it weighs on the heart. And so because we're in this moment where Black Lives Matter in some ways has become a trend, I don't want to call names anymore. Because I don't want us to become desensitized to the fact that these are people who are no longer with us and they should be with us right now. I don't want to desensitize us to the fact that there are families that are missing their loved ones, that go home to homes that have somebody missing, that go home to homes where there's an empty seat at the dinner table. We're coming up on a holiday season for some people, and this is a painful time for families who have lost their loved ones. And in particular, for families who have lost their loved ones for no other reason than because of the color of their skin. So, I think that's a good place to start, where Black Lives Matter comes from. Because in 2013, when Trayvon Martin's killer, George Zimmerman, was acquitted, Black Lives Matter really came from a cry of rage, grief. I wish I could tell you that it was from a strategic plan, or we sat in a room and we dreamed up this really cool thing. That's not what happened. What happened was when Trayvon Martin was murdered, nobody really heard about it. Nobody heard about it. It was on the news, but it wasn't the case that everybody was paying attention to. And in fact, the only reason that we know Trayvon Martin's name the way that we do now is because people in Trayvon's community, people who were organizers, demanded that George Zimmerman be held accountable for the crime that he had committed. Let me say that again. The only reason that we know the name of Trayvon Martin, the only reason that there was a trial where George Zimmerman was made to face a jury of his peers is because people who lived in Trayvon's community, people who have been fighting police abuse, police violence, made it so that we know Trayvon's name. Made it so that there was actually a trial. Made it so that George Zimmerman was actually arrested after he killed a child. 2013, not 1965. When Trayvon Martin was killed, and when George Zimmerman was arrested and placed on trial, I followed that case. I'm not really sure why. I don't know what it was in particular, because Black people are being murdered every day. I don't know what it was about this particular thing, but in some ways, I think what moved me was that when I saw pictures of his sweet face, he looked like my brother. He looked like my baby brother. But I don't think that was exactly the thing that moved me. I'm a pop culture person, and I'm interested all the time in how people respond to situations. And when George Zimmerman was placed on trial, I watched as the mainstream media started to spin it as the Trayvon Martin trial, but Trayvon was dead. Y'all remember that? MSNBC and CNN saying, Trayvon Martin trial. No, Trayvon was dead. George Zimmerman was on trial. I watched as the narratives, the popular narratives, were initially about self-defense, right? Here was this child who had the potential to overpower a grown man who had stature. I got curious about his own story, George Zimmerman's story, because at first, the way it was being reported was that he was a security patrol. Then we learned that he wasn't security patrol, he was kind of volunteering, taking his own initiative to patrol his community. Then we watched as the tapes of the 911 calls were released. Operator says, "Stop following this child." But he continues to pursue this child. I watched this trial as Trayvon was demonized after his own death. In fact, he was blamed for it. We all searched for many reasons. What did Trayvon Martin do to get himself killed? That was the story. Lots of speculation. Was he a bad kid? Did he ever get in a fight? What kind of student was he? Was he ever suspended? Maybe it was smoking weed that made him violent. Maybe it was smoking weed. Maybe it was smoking weed that made him violent. Remember that. Now, I'm not going to bust anybody out, but I hear the laughter. And haven't really heard a case where smoking weed made you violent and aggressive. But still, the story carries on. Remember Trayvon's friend? The last person to talk to him alive. So I watched as that child was also demonized. Her intelligence was questioned. Her background, who she was, what she did, what kind of person she was. I even watched that trial as his own parents were scrutinized. What did they do to cause their child's death? Now imagine being Sabrina and Tracy and having to go through this process, wanting to understand why a stranger would take the life of your child, and then having to sit through a process where your child is scrutinized, is dead, where you yourself are scrutinized. What did you do to cause your own child's death? And then to have to hear, ultimately, in July of 2013, that your son's killer would not be held accountable. Imagine that process. As you're also grieving the loss of your child, to have to look the murderer of your child in the face and know that they are going to go home to their life, their family. And you too are going to go home, but your life is never going to be the same. How many of us knew that Trayvon was not their only child? Trayvon had a brother. In fact, he just graduated. Can you imagine? And yet the way that this story was told was as if this is something that happens every day. Trayvon got called a thug more times than I can bear. And when George Zimmerman was acquitted, while there were some of us who felt like we had gotten punched in the stomach, I couldn't help but notice that there were also some people who were celebrating. This is 2013, not 1965, not 1954, not 1865. This is 2013. For myself, I was sitting with friends at a bar, and we were talking about what we thought might happen, what might be the outcome. And we spent all day talking about what do we think is going to happen. Now, my friends and I are lucky enough to have a community of people who are active in trying to bring about a new world. And those of us who are active spend a lot of time thinking about what we want that world to look like and feel like. And I have to be honest with you, I don't believe that the criminal justice system brings justice. The criminal justice system, as it's structured, brings punishment. It encourages us to punish, to lock people up and throw away the key, disappear them. And if you are ever reintroduced, good luck. You better figure it out. We're going to make sure that you don't have access to housing, that you can't vote, that you have to report that you've been imprisoned if you want to get a job. I don't see that as justice, me personally. But to be honest with you, as my friends and I were speculating about what we thought might happen in a system that we know works as it's supposed to, not in the way that we want it to, I'll admit it, I wanted him to go to jail. These are the contradictions that we all live with. Really deep inside, what I wanted was some kind of accountability. I wanted some kind of decision that said, it is not okay for you to take a child's life because of your perceptions of who you think they are. It is not okay for you to take a mother's child because of your perceptions of who you think Black people are, who you think we are, what you think we do. It's not okay. That's what I wanted from a system that I know doesn't give us that. But I wanted it, I'll be honest. And so as we sat around and talked about, okay, they can't let him off. That's just not possible. It's not possible that they'll let him off. He's got to serve some consequence. Might be a lot less than what we wanted. Certainly. Manslaughter? Involuntary? Maybe. People believe that he feared for his life. But something. There will be some consequence. And so we sat and we waited and we waited, and when the verdict was announced, and I'm sitting in a public place, in a bar, and people are loud and raucous and all of that, everything went silent. Everything went silent. And the shift in the mood, you could feel it. People's heads started to bow. My friends and I, we couldn't look at each other. I couldn't say anything. I just watched. I watched Black people leave that bar, and we couldn't look at each other. We didn't know what to say. Everything went quiet. First came the silence, then came the rage. What kind of country do we live in that would allow a child to be murdered and allow their killer to walk free? So as we sat in rage, in grief, in silence, my mind was racing 1,000 miles a minute. I wanted to understand, and I couldn't come up with anything. And so I thought maybe somebody else has something smart to say. So got on Facebook. It's a thing we do. Wanted to see what people were saying, how people were responding. Maybe that would help me sort out what I was feeling, what I needed to say, what I needed to do. And again, I'm somebody who's been doing this work for a very long time. And it's been a long time since I felt paralyzed. So I opened Facebook, and I started scrolling through my timeline, and y'all know how this works. I mean, the timeline is really your friends, and people who think like you, and you know, all that stuff. You get to pick who's in your online community. The stuff that I saw didn't work for me. Because, you know, on the one hand, you had what I call the social justice cynics. Yeah? These are folks who are like, I'm conscious, I know how this goes, and why are people so upset? We knew this was going to happen. There's no justice from the criminal justice system. Why are people so mad? We already knew. I understood that. I didn't feel it, but I understood it. It didn't sit well with me. Of course we should be upset. Even when we know that this is how things are set up to be. Where's our humanity if we don't feel? On the other side, I saw what might have enraged me more, which was, this is a horrible tragedy. And unfortunately, it's one that happens too often. And so that's why we need our kids to pull up their pants. That's why we need our kids to not wear hoodies. That's why we gotta vote. That's why we gotta get a good education. That's why you gotta get a good job. That's why, that's why, that's why, that's why. But all of those that's whys were about what could Black people do to keep ourselves from being killed. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't actually care. If you have your pants around your ankles, I don't care. You have them around your waist, I don't care, you still deserve to live. Maybe it's me. Last time I checked, you didn't deserve to be murdered if you don't vote. Last time I checked, it wasn't okay for you to be killed if you're wearing a hoodie. Last time I checked, it doesn't matter if you have a GED or a PhD, you deserve to breathe. Last time I checked, that's me. And so the combination of having watched that trial for months and watched how Black people are seen, conceived of in this society, watching that family have to grieve publicly for the entire world to see, and being told that their child's life does not matter. And then seeing the responses of not, what are we going to do about racist vigilantes? Because George Zimmerman is not the first, and he's not the last. No conversation about that, but all kinds of conversation about what Black people need to do to keep ourselves from being killed. And that's when I found something to say. So what I said was, my little Facebook rant, you know, Facebook, we put a whole essay on Facebook. I started talking about this, right? Like, what is this thing that we do that assumes that somehow, if we just present better, that we can keep ourselves from being murdered. How does that work? How about this? I love Black people. I love us in a deep, deep way. And I love all of us, and all of our complexity, and all of our stuff. I just do. I love us. And how about, I love ratchet Black people. I love, you know, and sometimes it's hard, but I love respectable Black people. You know, I was raised to be a respectable Black person. You know, I can understand that. But what could change about the world that we live in? One, if we decided to demand that our lives do actually matter. And so what I said was, Black people, I love you, I love us, we don't deserve to be murdered. Our lives matter. Black lives matter. And my sister Patrice, and no, y'all, she's not my real sister. Come on. That's my homegirl. I love my sister because we're tight like that. She said, that's it. That's what I was feeling. So she put a hashtag in front of it. I didn't know what it was. I was like, what's that thing? What is this? I learned later it's a way to continue the conversation. She and I were talking and we were processing, and you know, she said, what are we going to do to help keep our people alive? What can we do? We got to organize. That's who we are, we're organizers. We said we should start a project where we organize our people to fight back against what is a legacy that is built into the DNA of this country called racism. And then to fight back against the manifestations of that. All the different forms of state-sanctioned violence. And I'm going to break that down in a minute. And a few days later, my sister Opal, again, not my sister, she's my homegirl. She's like all techie and stuff, you know? And she was like, sis, I saw what you wrote. It resonated with me. My friends and my community and I, we've been talking about it for the last couple of days. And what if we actually created some platforms for people to be able to have this conversation? I said, well, do you know how to do that? Yeah, girl, you know how to do that. So quickly, she helped us build out a Facebook page, Twitter, Tumblr. And what we thought was, is there a way for us? Because our generation, we live on social media. We do. I'm not going to get into the merits of good or bad or whatever. It's just what it is. But clicking like is not going to save our lives. Retweeting is not going to save our lives. But what if we can create platforms online for people to connect so that they can do stuff together offline? Like in real time, like face-to-face, like person-to-person, like I can touch you and feel you and connect with you, not like you or retweet you, right? And as the days went on and there were protests that ensued, y'all remember, protests broke out all over. I know in Los Angeles, my sister Patrice helped to lead a demonstration in Beverly Hills. She wanted to make sure that folks who may not be thinking about this on a regular basis, who certainly wield power, were made to understand that we're not continuing business as usual. Yeah? In Brooklyn, people took the Brooklyn Bridge. Beautiful, beautiful images of hundreds and hundreds of people holding signs that said Black Lives Matter. In Florida, Dream Defenders, how are you? They took over the state capitol. They said, yeah, so here's the problem. George Zimmerman got away legally. Stand your ground laws. They occupied the Capitol to demand that stand your ground laws be repealed in the state of Florida. So this is the birth of how Black Lives Matter begins. Doesn't start as a hashtag. It starts as a love note to Black people in a moment where Black people were told that our lives don't matter. Yeah? You with me? Okay, just checking. So, you know, whenever I do these talks, people say, tell me how I can start a movement with a hashtag. And I laugh. I say, you can't start a movement with a hashtag. Hashtags aren't movements, they're hashtags. For real, y'all, hashtags are not movements. They're hashtags. Movements are comprised of people. People who decide that enough is enough. People who love other people and themselves so much that they're determined, not by themselves in a room behind a computer, but together with their communities, that they will bring forward a different and better world. Movements are not started by hashtags. And movements themselves are not hashtags. Hashtags are conversations. But if you don't believe me, how do we know that Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag? Well, today, Black Lives Matter has 26 chapters around the world. 24 in the US, 1 in Toronto, Canada, another in Accra, Ghana. And there are many more that are maybe not officially part of our network, but certainly people are using this banner not to click like and retweet, but to organize. We know Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag because when Michael Brown was killed a year ago, we were able to organize 500 people in less than 10 days to take a freedom ride to Ferguson. 500 Black people, medics, lawyers, Black media, organizers, families, who were watching the images, once again, of Black people being tear gassed, being shot with rubber bullets, being approached with tanks from the National Guard, and said, this is not 1954. This is 2014. And we can't just watch on CNN while Black people who rose up, not because people like to get into stuff, mostly because Mike Brown's body lay in the street for 4.5 hours in the middle of his community. 4.5 hours. Just steps from his mother's home. 4.5 hours. He lay on that street. He died on that street. He wasn't dead after he was shot several times. He died on that street after laying there for 4.5 hours. That's what mobilized 500 people to Ferguson. That's what caused the eruption that happened in Ferguson, which is really this big, y'all. Ferguson is like not the size of San Francisco, Oakland. It's like this big. How do we know that Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag? Well, in the last year, there's been 40 new laws passed in 20 states, all related to criminal justice. In fact, just yesterday, there was a law passed in California targeting racial profiling. And essentially what that law says is you have to report when you've murdered somebody. When law enforcement kills someone, you have to report who'd you kill. Seems pretty simple, right? It's already a big backlash. It's been less than 24 hours. Okay? How do we know that Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag? Well, all 26 of those chapters I just talked about, they're all organizing locally in their communities and have decided that they want to be connected nationally and internationally. How do we know that Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag? Because we have presidential hopefuls being forced to talk about criminalization, racial justice, anti-Black racism, state-sanctioned violence. They weren't talking about it before. And we did have to nudge them a little bit. You know, we did. We did. We had to. We still have to. Nudge them a little bit. Like, hey, there's some stuff going on. Should we talk about it or not? You know what I'm saying? How do we know that Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag? Because new political space has opened. New political space has been created, where suddenly more things are possible. It means something. I go to campuses all over the place. Every campus I go to, we did tie-ins. We're organizing. Like, that's good. It's awesome. I get calls from lawyers. In fact, there was just a conference in New York that brought together hundreds of lawyers for Black lives. I get calls from doctors and other health professionals. In fact, they're planning a gathering too. Doctors for Black lives. Where folks are coming together to try and figure out this question of how do we address the disparities. How do we address the disparities that Black folks are facing in every aspect of our lives? Not just criminal justice, my friends. Not just criminal justice. Now, every 28 hours in this country, a Black person is murdered by police, vigilantes, or security guards. every 28 hours. That's one a day. It's one a day. In this country, we have 2.5 million people that are locked in cages. 70% or more nonviolent offenders. We incarcerate more people here in the US than anywhere else in the world. Anywhere else. 2.5 million people in jail, in prison. 1 million of those folks are Black. Now remember, I just said, of that 2.5 million, more than 70% are nonviolent offenders. And 1 million of that 2.5 million are Black. But as I said, it's not just about criminal justice. How many people here have been hearing this conversation about women's economic opportunity, women's economic security? Anybody hearing that conversation? Yeah. Equal pay, before equal pay. It's a good thing. Before scheduling flexibility, right? It's a good thing. So let's talk about where Black folks fit into that. Right? Number one statistic we hear all the time, women make how much? 78 cents to every dollar that a man makes, right? Okay, should we break that down a little bit? Okay, so that's true. That is true for white women. White women make 78 cents to every dollar that a white man makes. When we talk about Black women, 64 cents to every 78 cents that a white woman makes, to every dollar that a white man makes. Yeah? This is also what we mean by Black Lives Matter. Let's talk about Black trans folks. Average life expectancy, Black trans woman, 35. 35. I'm 34. Any way you slice it, folks. We're talking about healthcare access. We're talking about education, right? Where Black students are like 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled. In fact, Black folks are more likely to go to jail than we are to go to college. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's all the aspects of our lives. It's not just policing. It's not just police violence. It's economic violence, poverty, unemployment. Yeah. It's about politics, representation, access to decision making. It's about the relationship between those things. Now, if you are incarcerated and you are charged with a felony, you no longer get to make decisions over your future. That's what it boils down to. You don't get to vote. Once you come out of a cage, what do? Go to apply for a job? You have to disclose. The felon. Right off the bat, before they've even met you. Yeah? Did y'all know that Black women are the fastest growing prison population in this country? You don't know that? It's true. It's true. For what? You want to know? Two major reasons. One, defending yourself against the violence of an intimate partner. Two, maybe there's three big reasons. They're all related. Two, nonviolent offenses, drugs, often in relationship to an intimate partner. Third one, you ready for this? What we call crimes of survival. Bad checks, forgery, that kind of stuff. I got a letter from a woman who was in prison in Denver, Colorado. She got 95 years. You want to know what for? Check fraud. Check fraud. So, when we talk about Black Lives Mattering, what we mean is that we believe that the world that we can bring forward is a world where the humanity of Black people is respected. Which means we don't lock up Black folks and throw away the key. Which means we don't allow for Black folks to trail behind, to not have access to education, to not have access to employment. It means that we fight like hell to make sure that Black lives matter politically, economically, socially, culturally. And when we talk about Black lives, we mean all Black lives. We don't just mean Black men's lives. Did y'all hear me though? We mean all Black lives. Poor Black lives, migrant Black lives, trans Black lives, queer Black lives, disabled Black lives, all Black lives. Whew, my goodness. Lord, I can talk. Okay. I ain't got that much time left. Maybe you're excited about that. That's okay. I'm teasing you. There's lots more I want to say, but let me go into this because we need to spend some time here. So, can we talk about all lives matter? Is that okay? Let me get comfortable. All right, so here's the thing, y'all. Okay, so here's the thing. All lives do matter. I really mean that. All lives do matter. All lives do matter. Now pick up your phone and tweet it. We said, guys, it said all My world is shook. All lives do matter. Your life matters, your life matters, my life matters, your lives matter. And that's the world we want to live in. But it's not the world we live in right now. It's not the world that we live in right now. And there's no denying that. I mean, we just talked about it for almost an hour. There's no denying that we do not live in a world where all lives matter. No matter how much we want to, it doesn't exist right now. That's the most basic way I can break it down. We can't live in a society where we throw people in cages and throw away the key and go, all lives matter. It's not true. We can't live in a society where every 28 hours, Black people are being murdered by law enforcement and say, all lives matter. We can say, we want a world where all lives matter. That would be a true statement. But we don't live in that world right now. And if we're going to address the issues that we face, we got to start square. We got to start with what is. We got to start with what is. So here's the thing. If we want to get to that place where all lives matter, then we got to fight like hell for Black lives now. Declaring that Black lives matter doesn't mean your life doesn't matter. It doesn't. It's not a hierarchy. My life matters more than yours. No, that's not what we're trying to do here. But I do find it fascinating that in response to Black folks crying out for our lives, that the response is not, yes, what do we do to make sure that this stops? This is unacceptable. The response is, I mean, all lives matter. For real. Can you say that to Trayvon's family? Can you say that to Jordan Davis's family? Can you say that to Mike Brown's family? You can't. Although some try. How can we say that all lives matter when each one of those people I just named were called thugs? You must have done something. You know, when Jordan Davis was killed in a gas station parking lot by Michael Dunn, who was really incensed about how loud their music was. Do you know that after he shot that child, that he went home with his girlfriend? Ate pizza, went on like nothing happened. Can we say all lives matter? These are the types of situations that we're facing. Let me also say this. You know, I spend a lot of time on the internet. And it's special. But I spend a lot of time because I like to hear it. What are people saying? And I'm starting to see this thing the last couple months be like, well, what about y'all killing your own people though? What? I mean, if we were to look at stats, I like data. I like stories too, but I like data. So, most violence that's committed, like in society, by people who look like each other. In a shocking turn of events, what that means is white-on-white crime is actually higher than the rates of black on. I don't even use that term. We'll call it intercommunal violence. We look at statistics. But again, because of the culture that we live in, there is an unhealthy obsession with how black people live our lives. As if we're like an aberration. We do not talk about white-on-white crime when someone like Dylan Roof goes into a black church, prays with a group of black people, and then murders them. There is not the same outrage, and I did not not one time see nothing called All Lives Matter. I didn't. But there are shootings in schools where children are killed, where students are killed. And the stories that we get back, who was the shooter? But what's more important about that story is not that they're white. I mean, it's interesting. I think sometimes black people be like, oh, this is us. What's interesting about those stories is that Dylan Roof was never called a thug. He was misunderstood. He had mental health issues, which is actually really insulting. We find ways to humanize white shooters, and we're really good at demonizing black ones. And then the other thing that we just don't talk about as a nation is that in each case, what they're talking about right before they break is their fear, loathing, and hatred. Black people. And more recently, women. Dylan Roof said, and this like stuck with me. I mean, it stuck with me because you know, it's with black people in the church praying. They saw someone come in that they didn't recognize, but they welcomed him. Sit with us. And he sat there, and what he said was, I thought about not doing it. They were so nice to me. But I had to do it. They're raping our women. That's what he said. That's what he said. What are we doing? stop racist violence. What are we doing? You know, the shooter of Oregon, you know, his mother was stockpiling guns. She was afraid Obama was going to take them from her. And let's be real, y'all. Let's be real. We got some work to do. And it starts with being honest about what we're facing. It doesn't start with oppression or Olympics. Nobody wants to be the most oppressed, I promise. I swear. I don't want to be the most oppressed. But I do want to be free. And isn't that the supposed pillar of the country we live in? Land of the free, home of the brave. Yeah. Talk to singers, children. Believe it. But unfortunately, we don't live it. So that's what we're trying to do. I want to close by saying this, because we could go into this all that time. Forever, child, forever. And you know, the real deal, to be honest, is like, so check this out. The kind of hatred is learned. We're not born with it. We're not born with it. We're babies, we don't care. We're like, you know, we like you, I like you, love you. We good. And then somewhere along the way, we get messages. Johnny, I just don't think it's a good idea to play with that kid. It's the truth. I've seen it. We get messages. I just don't think that child's trying as hard in school. We might put them in special ed. They're fighting a lot. Somebody call the police. That's how we get here. So the question is, how do we get out? And you know, lots of people have been trying to figure this out for a long time. And I don't have the answer. Sorry. Good thing you didn't pay to come here. But I have some thoughts. My first thought is, it's actually something more than policies. We're not going to vote our way out of racism. We're not going to legislate our way out of it either. There has to be a relationship between changing our culture and having our agreements reflect the culture that we want to live in. Has to be. Has to be. Second thought. It's important, vital, actually, for us to be able to articulate what would a world look like, feel like, be like, where all lives actually did matter. You know what I'm saying? You feel me? You vibing right here. Because the thing is, we can talk all we want. I mean, I just talked for an hour about all the things that were wrong. Sorry. But really what moves us is the desire for something new. What sustains us is that thing that they know we're moving toward. We can see it, we can feel it. In fact, we try to bring it closer to us. You know what I'm saying? Third thing, we gotta start telling the truth. You know, it was cool, I got to talk with some folks beforehand, and I always ask, what's the campus culture like? I don't feel like I haven't heard the last of that. But I asked that question, honestly, because I'm wanting to understand how much ownership people feel like they have over the place where they spend so much time. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like, I just got the whole breakdown. Okay, well, you know, the thing is, we're a young campus, trying to figure some stuff out, trying to create more spaces for students to be able to be active, to be able to be engaged. Yeah? Did I hear that right? And then I also heard, and we want this campus to be diverse. Well, I think that's important. I think that's important. But what's diversity without truth? When you look around this room, look around you. Is this what your campus looks like every day? So here's the thing. That's the answer I get at every campus I go to. They'd be like, no, bud, you pulled all the black people in one room today! But here's the thing, y'all. Here's the thing. What is diversity without truth? Yes. I mean, just keep it real. You can't just put a bunch of people in a community together and like coexist. No acknowledgement of where people come from, what their stories are, what their histories are, what they need to feel comfortable. What they need to be their best selves. We all need that, right? This is supposed to be, these are incubators for new ideas and innovation, brilliance. But we don't actually create the culture for that. It gets reflected. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't know, I don't go to school here. I'm just reflecting back what I heard. But I'll say this again. There's no diversity without truth. So, maybe the truth is, maybe we need to do some digging there. You know, really the last thing. I was reading this article today about this woman, mother, who, you know, she was really upset about the way that this textbook had been changed. Y'all read that? The transatlantic slave trade brought millions of workers, which is like half-assed true, but like, but like these are examples, right? These are examples of how it is that we create dynamics, how we create cultures and communities where we don't actually understand each other. And not only do we not understand each other, but we don't understand how we got here. Now, if I had like another hour, I would go into all this stuff. Liberalism, all this stuff. I just like go in, right? But I'm not teaching my class. No. That's just like give you time to ask questions. And that's good. I like doing that. Yeah. That's why. We also can't have change without truth. So, in conclusion, the roots. I want to end with this. I think what we need right now, is a lot more co-conspirators. Whatever happens in your body, when folks say Black Lives Matter, you're like, but all lives matter. Like, if we just sat with that for a second, really what that reflects, I think, this is my thought for now, I might change my mind. But I think what that reflects is actually a deep shame. A deep and profound shame. It's okay. It's shameful. The question is, how do we not get stuck there? Where we then use that shame to continue to polarize. Can that shame be used as a way to connect? As a way to say, you know what? It's not good right now. And so I'm committed. I'm committed. I'm committed to demanding that my legislature do everything in their power to ensure that these things don't happen again. And you can pick any area, by the way, pick anything. Whatever you care about. Healthcare, education, gentrification, housing, poverty, whatever it is, pick something. We can use that for change. Not for polarizing, not for shaming, not for, survival of the fittest kind of things. That's killing us, all of us, really. It's killing us. This notion that, well, okay, if I were to acknowledge that things were not the way that they should be, it's really because people aren't working hard enough for it. They must not really want it. But God, I see so many people and they just seem like they're not driven. You know, that kind of thing? That's also shame. But if we could change that, transform that into something powerful, we could do a lot together. What connects us, fundamentally, is the desire to live a full life, to be able to be who we are, as we are, and to have that be celebrated. Not punished, not criminalized, celebrated. We all want room, seat at the table. And some of us have more access to tables than others. This is true. Let's not hide it, That's kind of doing that thing, like, you're beautiful. No, you're beautiful. No, you're beautiful. Some of us have more access than others. Let's use that. Let's use that. Because in essence, and I'm going to say this, it might not be popular, but I'll just say it anyways, just because I feel like it. It's not Black folks' job to fix racism. It's not. but we can get out of it together if we're committed to shifting it. So I think I'm gonna wrap there. I have a lot more to say about a lot of stuff, but I'm hoping that we get more conversation from the audience, so thank you.